This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
A new Greenprint plan envisions more bike lanes, paths, and green spaces for the area. Tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by Rusty Bloodworth, Executive VP for Boyle Investments and a longtime supporter of the Memphis chapter of ULI. Thanks for being here.
You bet.
Chip Johnson from Hernando, Mississippi, Mayor of Hernando, Mississippi. Thank you for being here.
Glad to be here.
John Zena from the Office of Sustainability, Regional Greenprint Planning. We'll talk a bunch more about what you do. And Bill Dries, Senior Reporter from the Memphis Daily News. Let me come first. Thank you all for being here. Let me come first to you, John. You're the director of the office that has put a plan together, a regional plan, crosses not just Memphis or not just Shelby County, but obviously into Mississippi. Tell us what the plan is and why it's important.
The Mid-South Regional Greenprint and Sustainability Plan is a 4-county, 3-state plan that seeks to connect Shelby County, Fayette County, Tennessee, Crittenden County, Arkansas, and DeSoto County, Mississippi with a network of green space. That looks at how we can build on our natural assets that we have an abundance of in our region to create more than just recreational opportunities, but also think about how we can leverage our green spaces to enhance transportation options, improve our health and our environment, improve quality of life and communities throughout our region, and also provide opportunities for economic growth.
Yeah, and Chip, you're here. I mean, this is you're from Mississippi. It's Shelby County. It's sometimes, maybe the media makes more of it. The areas are in competition with one another, but this is an area in which working together apparently is very important.
I'm a big fan of using the term friendly rivalry instead of competition, because I'm a firm believer that anything good that happens in the whole Memphis region is good for Hernando, Mississippi, and vice versa. So I think we need to work together on this plan, because anything we do, if I build a trail in Hernando, it needs to eventually connect. And if there's a trail built in South Haven, it needs to eventually connect to somewhere in Memphis. A dead-end trail does no one any good. So I think doing this regional plan is good on a lot of fronts.
And Rusty, you've been involved with Urban Land Institute in Memphis for many, many years now. You also, Boyle obviously has done development of all kinds, shapes and sizes in the area. In your time here, there's been this shift, I imagine, that you've seen. I mean, it used to be Memphis was known, we lead the fattest city, and it was not a city was viewed as healthy. And yet, just in the last 5 to 10 years, you've got the Green Line, you've got the kind of rebirth of Shelby Farms, you've got bike lanes all over. Your sense of the shift and how long it's, what's it taken to get to this point, and what does it look like going 10, 15 years out?
Well, I think we're excited because there has been a shift, and I think that the shift, for me, looking back historically, probably the point where it tipped was the Green Line. I think the Green Line brought in an opportunity to actually get on a bike and go a fairly long distance and connect something that was very precious, Shelby Farms, way deep into the Memphis community. And we had things that laid the foundation, things like the Shelby Farms activity and investments that had occurred. We had a little bit of trail work, but really that Green Line, I think, captured a lot of people's imagination, both young people and older people, but particularly the group that my children were captured by that Green Line. And it's all about, I think, getting great talent here in Memphis, but it's also retaining the talent that's growing up here. And so we think this is critical.
Yeah, Bill.
And Mayor, you touched on something about you build the trail, it's got to connect to something at some point. And Rusty, I think your point on this as well is everybody I know of who gets into the Green Line, who finds out about these trails, these greenways, the first thing they want to know, the first question is, okay, where does it connect up to this? How can I get there. Is that what has brought us to kind of a tipping point? Because it's almost, it's really contagious. I can go from here to there, I can go from there to here.
One of the things we think about in terms of new urbanism is linking things together in really tight loops. The smaller for walking, it's really important to have blocks that are not too large. And the smaller the block is, the more people will walk around the block. The same thing is true when we think about trails. That you've got to be able to have a connectivity, but you need really interesting places to go on that walk. And when we can take these great dots that we've got in our region, that we've got down in Mississippi and the cold water resources and on the Wolf and the Nonconnah, the Loosahatchee, Shelby Forest, Shelby Farms, downtown, over to Arkansas. We start to connect these things in loops. We get a vibrancy. We haven't seen it yet. I think we're right now just looking at linear connections, but we really don't have a great loop system. I think when the first time we get a real, true, full loop, people will be all over using it, and that it'll be something we haven't seen before. So that's really exciting. That's coming.
Mayor, I was going to say, what have you seen in terms of the promise that Rusty talked about in terms of development that and potential for it that you've seen in Hernando?
What we've found, through a lot of exploration of other cities, we found that people really, really want to locate their new businesses where they want to live. And I think we all heard Mick Cornett from the Oklahoma City tell his story about how businesses now aren't necessarily looking for tax incentives as much as they're looking for a place where they and their families want to live. And that's what we need to create. We can't just hope we're going to get a business that comes in and solves our whole tax problem and creates a great community. We first have to create that great community so that we have a place they want to live. And I think that's what we're seeing happen now. We're seeing more, and I look at my town more than most, and we're seeing companies literally want to move to our town because it's a place where they want to live. And a huge piece of that is pedestrian and bicycle facilities. And I also see that other people are getting that bigger picture. Our Northern District Highway Commissioner, Mike Taggart, he helped award us a transportation enhancement grant a couple of years ago that we're about to see come to fruition next spring. And we're going to do a 2-mile linear park for pedestrians and cyclists on one of our main roads. And the reason that we got that grant above some others is that we had a plan. And part of that plan had been involving others. We had a small grant for bicycle striping, and we were deciding where to stripe those lanes. And somebody much smarter than me said, wait a minute, why didn't we ask the bicycle club where to put those lanes? And we did. And the bicycle club said, no, you need to put them here so we can find a safe route under the interstate. And sure enough, they were right, because the highway commissioner looked at that and said, hey, y'all been looking at this, y'all been working across different boundaries, and where you're asking to put this new one connects to the rest of town. So all of a sudden we get a $600,000 grant for a 2-mile linear park based on proper planning and being inclusive of all the people around us.
And what about funding? I mean, I'll go to you, John. I mean, we talk about grants. I mean, how the plan envisions many, many miles. Is it 450, give or take? I mean,
450 new miles.
New miles.
500 total. Got about 50 on the ground today.
Okay. The cost associated with that is huge. Is that right?
Sure.
So
yes.
where does that funding come from? And it's not one source, I don't think. It's not all at once. But talk about that part.
Yeah, absolutely. So the plan is a 25-year plan to, as you said, put 500 miles of trails on the ground. And in order to do that, I think we're going to have to take advantage of a broad number of funding sources over the course of that 25 years. Certainly, we want to take advantage of federal funding, and the plan itself was federally funded through a Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant. But we also want to look at state opportunities similar to transportation enhancement funds, any local funding opportunities that we may have down the road. But also, I think we've got a lot of interest from private sector, from the philanthropic community to think about what the funding looks like to help get these projects going. The interesting thing too about this type of plan is, even though it's 500 miles that comprise the network, it's not necessarily one big massive project. It's hundreds of small projects that we can just do piece by piece. And I think similar to what Mayor Johnson talked about with the buy-in from the community, that's been a major strength that we've had in putting this plan together, and I think will be a major strength in helping us leverage funds down the road. The fact that we've had over 80 organizations help participate in putting this plan together. We've reached out to thousands of residents across the region who've been extremely supportive and excited about what this can bring. And we've had so much interest from public, private, philanthropic sectors. And I think that demonstrating that regional buy-in helps us to be able to leverage all of those different funding sources that we'll certainly have to bring into
Right.
play.
And as you said, Russ, I mean, if the Green Line was the kind of tipping point, I mean, that was a kind of public, and it was some big, moneyed philanthropists getting together and then working with the railroad company and kind of turning the corner. I mean, clearly, Shelby Farms the same deal, where the Hyde Foundation and others come in and say, look, if we build it, we think people will come, and they certainly have.
Right.
From a business point of view, and maybe from you've developed all over the area, Boyle Investments has. Where the money, I mean, how does the money work there? How does your view of saying, look, I'm going to put development here versus here because there is a green line, or there is a park, or there are bike paths? I mean, does that factor in for you on the development side, and is that more and more important when you look at how you develop and put big money into an office park or apartment complex or whatever it is?
I think it's going to be more and more important, and it's clearly important now. And the thing that we see is that there is some increase in land values that are close to it, particularly on the residential side. But we don't really have, right now we've got the linear trail system, and we see a little bit of increase, but I think when we get the more ridership for biking or walking on those trails, the higher that value becomes, particularly for the residential component. The other side of it is the private sector can help on the implementation by contributing as well. We've probably contributed 5 miles worth of land adjoining some of the tributaries, both on the Nonconnah and the Wolf, I mean Boyle has, to Wolf River Conservancy or Nature Conservancy or to different groups. And we did it early for conservation reasons. And now we have a different view because we've got all these trails, some of the trails that are out in Germantown, run across land that we gave to Germantown, and then 2.5 miles of trail are on our Humphreys Boulevard development. And we're getting a benefit we hadn't anticipated. Yeah. No question about it.
Yeah. Bill.
So Mayor, what is the state of the Greenprint plan currently in Hernando? And what's your next major goal there?
In Hernando, we had a sub-grant off of the main grant for the DeSoto County Natural Resources Plan, and that draft has been sent out to us to mark up and send back, and we should have the final copy in a couple of months. But I think that I am, like most people, I'm very visual. And if I can see a map that shows where the trails are currently and where the new ones are proposed, then I can start thinking about what our next step is. And I'll go back to an example we have of how people need to see where things are going to be before they'll donate. So we had all these people wanting to build a dog park and build a skate park in Hernando, but there was no land. As soon as we had a master parks plan approved by the board and said, here's where a skate park can go, and here is where a dog park can go, they went out and started raising money, because it's easy to raise money when you know where it's going. So we're at the point we're about to build a dog park because we have land and they raised enough money. The skate park people have raised 30 grand, they're well on their way. So even though we can't afford as a government all the time, we have to give a plan to the people if we expect private money to come in.
And along those lines, Rusty, at the outset of this, when the Urban Land Institute was talking to people about donating land in this corridor,
Right.
How hard to sell was that?
We've had some pretty big donors who have given land to facilitate these the greenways along the blueways, and but then there are a lot of people that don't. I don't think they have the vision for it. That's one reason why this plan really does help. I think private landowners think about how they could participate. And the other side of it, which the mayor would be directly involved in, is the regulatory side, because the real difficulty, John and I have talked about this a lot, in getting a complete network together. It's fairly easy to take ground that is very flood prone, which is what's always the case adjoining the rivers, and get people to think about giving that. It's altogether a more difficult task to get people to give the connections between these river systems that create an overall grid or network or series of loops. And going over the ridges means you're going over very developable ground that has a higher value, and the only way that can occur is by having a plan that actually shows the municipality and the Board of Aldermen or the City Council people that we really need this trail here. And that's part of the big push to me of the green print, is to get the overall network visualized so that the regulatory bodies can help encourage or extract, depending on the attitude or the inclination of who they're dealing with, can get those trails in place, because that's much harder than doing the trails along the river.
The Wolf River Conservancy, I mean, they're trying to do a greenway all the way from, ultimately, I think, the Ghost River all the way to the Mississippi. And the plan, and what they have to raise money for, and I've talked to Keith Cole, who's the executive director there, and he said, oh, you know, people think it's all this money is going to go towards this 3-foot wide path. He said, making a 3-foot wide path is really simple. It's not a particularly difficult construction project. It's about all that land and all that land acquisition.
That's right, lots of land.
So how does it, back to you, John, I mean, does the plan envision mechanisms of doing that? I mean, is it all purchase? Is it all donations? Is it eminent domain, which freaks some people out? I mean, what's the plan say about all that land acquisition or right-of-way acquisition?
Right. So what we tried to do in the plan, in the implementation section, is really lay out all of the different options that are available for land acquisition. In every case, it's going to be different, and certainly, you know, Keith Cole would tell you the same thing with his experience just along the Wolf River. Is with each section that they've done, the experience has been different, and sort of thinking about you know, how to go about acquiring different properties. You know, you mentioned you know, donations. Certainly, that would be something that we probably put at a higher priority, a higher tier. Other types of acquisition. There are also a number of regulatory opportunities that communities can take advantage of in helping sort of piece together the network. You know, eminent domain is certainly something that is available, although I think that should probably be a last resort you know, opportunity. But the plan does try to look through, you know, what opportunities are available for acquiring land, particularly, you know, given the 3 states that we're working with, so that guidance can be available for whether it's municipalities or nonprofit organizations or some other organization who wants to take on contributing, you know, a piece to the network in the long run.
What's your experience? I mean, as a politician, as a, you know, the mayor of a city, I mean, you've got this mix of ways that we're talking about of getting access to the land. How has Hernando approached that? What's been the reception of residents and landowners and so on?
Usually the last thing you want to do is eminent domain.
Right.
So we work around that, and I think that's where the plan comes into play. I was telling you about the new 12-foot wide multi-use path we're going to build. That's been on our comprehensive plan for quite a few years. So what's happened is, as the Arby's built and the Guarantee Bank built and the car wash that's about to we're building, they knew there was supposed to be a 12-foot wide path there. So we have some sections already built by those businesses. So it's right there in the road right away. It didn't bother anybody. Instead of building a 5-foot sidewalk, they built a 12-foot. And that fits right in with our plan. That'll be less we have to build with that grant money. The other thing is you can use tools that developers like. We've got the North Mississippi Land Trust, and I know there's Land Conservancy, and the developers can donate some of those paths that might go along the ditch banks, and they can get a tax credit for that, and then it's in perpetuity with the land trust, and we can put the trails through there.
Yeah.
So, and that helps the developers. That's a win-win deal between the developers and the city, but I think eminent domain is always the last choice we want to make.
Right, and before I go back to Bill, is there a map that people can go to on the website?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So on our website, midsouthgreenprint.org, it's called the concept map. It's on the website under the section title called Vision. We've also have the first draft of the final plan on the website as well, which you can easily find by going to the homepage.
And so
and that contains the concept map.
At MidSouthGreenprint.org. Okay, Bill.
There's also the question of programming with this. Is there a balance in developing this network of programming versus people who use it in solitude? I'll say for lack of a better term.
That's a great question. The primary focus that we had was creating, an idea for the network, and so that we're able to create connectivity throughout the region, and do things similar to what Rusty and Mayor Johnson have talked about. Connecting our communities, connecting destinations, not just our green assets and community destinations, but also employment destinations as well. That was sort of the first or the main intent of the plan. However, the plan also includes a number of recommended actions that help sort of give additional weight to the plan and meaning. And programming is one of the things that we looked at in there. There's a section on talking about the regional network of parks, greenways, and open spaces that talks about not just creating new spaces, but improving access and improving use of our existing spaces. When we got out to the community and we were talking about the plan, early on, a lot of people expressed enthusiasm for the opportunity to connect across the region, but equally an interest in improving the accessibility, the use, and the benefits that we have in our existing green spaces. Right now, the region has an abundance of green space, but not all of it is well used. And I think creating pilot programs at the community scale, doing things where neighborhood organizations are working with local governments, local businesses, even schools to help improve programming in green spaces, I think would improve the use so that as those connections are made, you have more destinations along the network, but also there's more opportunities within neighborhoods for individuals and children to be able to use the green space in a productive way that has benefits for all ages and all levels of ability.
Right, and we've seen that to some extent with the western end of the Green Line along Tillman, where the Binghamton Community Development Corporation has been very involved. And it's not an involvement just on Broad Avenue. It's an involvement with housing right there at the end of the Green Line at this point.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about the High Line in New York. I don't know how many people have been on the High Line, and it just opened. And people who haven't, it's this kind of amazing thing, and it's a couple of miles long. It's it's an elevated train. It used to be a freight train for people who don't know about it. They're about to open the last section, and I don't know exactly what the question, but I'm going to look at you, Rusty, for some kind of answer. It has been hugely expensive. It's amazing. I mean, we talk about a $600,000 grant. I think the last half mile they've opened cost $75 million. Now, I guess this is New York money, not Mid-South money, but the transformation of those neighborhoods has been remarkable, and it's a chicken and egg thing of which came first. But many people point to that Green Line going in there has raised property values and brought restaurants and so on. People have talked about that that will happen with the Green Line here. Again, do you see that happening? I mean, the peripheral of impact.
But not at that.
No, it's New York dollars. Yeah, that's New York
those are
dollars.
New York dollars. We have to do those Shelby County and Northern Mississippi dollars. I do see it happening, and it is happening. I think part of the wonder there was you had a very unsafe setting in the urban area of that part of New York, and then suddenly you have this very controlled, totally safe from a standpoint of no vehicular, it's completely bypassing that. And that's really, in a way, what we have along our greenways. We have a setting where we don't cross many roads at all. And the Green Line crosses like twice to get to Tillman.
Right.
I guess it crosses at both Highland and
Perkins,
High Point Terrace.
High Point Terrace, yeah.
But otherwise, you're really pretty safe, and that safety factor is something that introduces something new in kind of the older parts of Memphis, if we can make it that way, and part of it is getting a lot of use, which is then back to the strategy of why we want the connectivity in the loops.
Do you see that at all as a mayor? I mean, people concerned about running, and I mean, how do you manage people's expectations of safety with bike lanes and paths and trails and so on?
You know, what I've seen happen very directly in our town is a time where there were some houses built before the proposed trail behind their house was built. And once their houses were there, they were scared to have the trail built.
Right.
They thought it would bring something bad.
Place for people to get in their home and
Certainly.
run away.
Yeah. But on the other hand, we have a Lee's Summit Park that we built for $300,000, $250,000 that in grant money, and it has a trail. And the first house that was built backing up to it, very quickly the new homeowner put in a gate so they could get to the trail.
Right.
The next, and this is only 5 houses, I think, but the next 4 houses that were built by the builder, he built them with gates and called that trail an amenity, and they sold like hotcakes.
Yeah.
So it's, it's what people are used to, or it's a perception, but there are, those houses sold quicker. He built those there instead of on the lots away because he knew he could sell them faster. Parks are an amenity, trails are an amenity. People are clamoring for those things. Anywhere you go in the nation, you can just look, there's data just piled up that says a home near a park is worth more money.
All right, we're going to let that be the last word. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Rusty. Thank you, John. Thank you, Bill Dries. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week. Good night.